Time really freaking flies, don't it? Pokemon Sword and Shield are right around the corner, marking the beginning of the 8th generation of Pokemon and the end of the 7th. Pokemon generations have always been pretty short, but as I've gotten older, it feels like the end of a generation really sneaks up on me. Several years ago, pretty much immediately after Pokemon X and Y came out, I made a list of my favorite Kalos Pokemon. That list would be very different if I made it at the end of the generation instead of the beginning, which is part of why I decided I'd do this video now. I get to cap off my time with Gen 7 with a look back, and with a more well-formed opinion on this gen's Pokemon. When Sun and Moon first came out, I boldly stated this was one of the strongest generations of Pokemon on the design level, and while I'll admit I was high on the game's recent release when I said that, I still mostly stand by it. That doesn't mean it's my favorite collection of Pokemon, that's still probably Gen 3 or 5, but I was consistently impressed with how much thought went into every Pokemon's design. The topic is self-explanatory, but I should mention before we start for the purposes of this video that I will be counting Alolan forms. I know they aren't technically Gen 7 Pokemon, but they are new to this game and I want to include a couple, and that's why we're calling this Top 10 Alola Pokemon. Nailed it. Since they're only here because I'm being generous to them, we're gonna start the list with my included Alolan forms. I'm still pretty bitter about how Alolan forms were executed with how few there were in total, but I like most of them. The best thing about Alolan forms is that they breathe new life into old, tired Pokemon. Some of them were fan favorites before they got new forms. Marowak and Raichu were always pretty popular, for example, but there were some that really needed the new coat of paint. No one gave a shit about Exeggutor before it became an absolute unit, and speaking for myself, I didn't give a rat's ass about Sandslash. Then they made it an ice type. Holy shit. Sandslash always left me lukewarm, not because of its design, that part's fine, but because it just isn't that good of a Pokemon. It's not bad, but it's incredibly plain, just a slow, bulky, pure ground type with a crippling weakness to strong special attacks. Alolan Sandslash, on the other hand, is the unique Ice-Steel type. This makes it weak as shit to fire and fighting Pokemon, but adds a billion resistances and poison immunity, meaning it can actually use that physical bulk for something. That type also gives you a lot of strong stab options, even if Sandslash can't take advantage of all of the best ice moves. Alolan Sandslash's abilities stay mostly the same to its Kanto counterpart, just swap out the Sandstorm with Hail, which isn't great. Hail is a pretty garbage weather effect. Its move pool is also fairly lackluster. It learns Iron Head early, which is about the only Steel-type move it'll need, but it doesn't gain access to many good physical ice moves, at least in Sun and Moon. Icicle Spear upon evolution is good enough to get the job done, but it's the best you'll get access to until the ass end of the game. Despite these issues, I enjoyed using my Alolan Sandslash a lot. Its diverse type coverage and strong attack stat made it one of my team's strongest offensive forces, as long as I kept it away from anything that could punch it or burn it. Or I guess, melt it. Reading this back to myself, I've been pretty hard on Alolan Sandslash, but don't get the wrong idea. Alolan Sandslash raised my opinion of this family by a ton, and a lot of that is bolstered by its type and strong design. And I've been trying to avoid the word cool as much as I can because everyone just hears the obvious pun, but it's an apt descriptor. Alolan Sandslash is really cool. My second and only other Alolan form on this list, Dugtrio was a Pokemon I liked long before it grew hair. I remember when it was first sneakily shown off in the Sun and Moon demo, everyone was so bewildered by it, trying to figure out what type it was and why the hell they gave Dugtrio hair. The conclusion the fandom came to was that the hair was based on a specific volcanic glass called Pele's hair. According to the Pokedex, the hair is actually metallic whiskers, and it's seen as some sort of island deity, so the Pele's hair theory kinda checks out. Add to that, Pele's hair is brittle, which falls in line with Dugtrio being a super weak Pokemon defensively. The concept is so out there, but it's as well thought out as it is obscure. Dugtrio is historically one of my favorite Pokemon to use in the Kanto games. You get access to it fairly early, and it's a strong physical sweeper throughout most of the game. In Alola, you get access to Diglett fairly early on, and thanks to an attack buff and some extra tools in its moveset, it does that sweeping job even better. It doesn't learn too many different moves from a regular Dugtrio, but the added Steel type gives it access to Iron Head, which is always welcome. That's about all the Steel type does for it though. Steel is and always will be an amazing defensive type, but Dugtrio is frail as shit, so you're not going to be able to depend on its natural defenses at all. It's funny that they even gave it an extra bit of defense, which is just ridiculous. It's like they wanted it to be just a little bit beefier. Now it can take 2 whole sneezes from a Rattata. Now that is durability. In all seriousness, it doesn't make a difference. Your primary use for Dugtrio is going to be going fast and hitting things hard with Iron Head and Earthquake. One thing I do want to note with Alolan Dugtrio is that, to this day, I'm a bit disappointed that it's a Steel type. The Pele's hair concept made me, and some other people, imagine it was going to be a Fire type, and that would have benefited Dugtrio a lot. Fire is a great offensive type, and a Fire ground sweeper would have been awesome. The Steel type is fine, and I like the design in Dugtrio in general too much to be upset, but Volcanic Glass isn't hard. I know Minecraft makes obsidian out to be this super strong, impossible to break material, but volcanic glass is brittle as fuck. It doesn't really fit the steel type. Sorry to go all Neil deGrasse Tyson on you, but it's the truth. Golisopod is one of the coolest fucking Pokemon designs that's ever been made. I remember when Wimpod was first shown off, I just knew that it was going to evolve into a monster. It's the Gyarados effect, a wimpy, terrible Pokemon that compensates big time with its evolution. Wimpod is a hilariously weak Pokemon, and a cowardly one at that, and knowing it was based on an Isopod, I expected a horrifying beast from the trenches of hell. What we got isn't so much an abomination as much as it is a total badass. Golisopod is a hulking armored bug that feels like it gets more awesome the more I look at it. It's just so fucking cool! I may not have used one myself, but I've seen it in action plenty, both in the single-player campaign on Guzma's team and in multiplayer. It's ridiculously strong on the offensive, boasting a hefty attack stat, plenty of hard-hitting attacks, and an assortment of different priority moves. That last part is what's really interesting about Golisopod mechanically. The idea with Golisopod is hemorrhaging its speed stat, but making up for that with moves that completely ignore speed. It learns Sucker Punch, Aqua Jet by breeding, and its signature move, First Impression, a powerful bug-type move that has priority equal to that of extreme speed, though at the cost of only being usable on turn 1. Throw Swords Dance in that last move slot, and you've got yourself a ridiculously strong surprise sweeper. And it's got a stupid defense stat to boot, and solid special defense too. It's the total package, but emergency exit. This is a weird ability. In some ways it's actually pretty useful since you can get multiple uses out of First Impression when Golisopod comes back in. And in some cases getting Golisopod the hell out of dodge is the best move for it, saving you the turn spent on a switch. But on the flip side, this ability can really mess up your whole game if you aren't careful. Entry hazards like Stealth Rock are especially dangerous with forced switching, and I've seen plenty of admittedly comical situations where Golisopod doesn't even get the chance to do anything before yeeting itself back into its ball. Weighing the pros and cons, the ability isn't great, but I love the concept. It's the exact same as Wimpod's Wimp Out, but with a more tactical sounding name to cover up the fact that Golisopod, in its heart of hearts, is still a massive pussy. A weird pattern I've noticed with myself is that I really like crab Pokemon. Kingler is probably my favorite Kanto Pokemon, Clawitzer is one of my favorite Kalos Pokemon, I like Dwebble a lot, I've liked Crawdaunt a lot more after the physical special split, there hasn't been a dud crab Pokemon in my opinion, and that trend continues with Crabrawler and Crabominable. I love this little dude and this less than little dude. Crabominable is exactly the type of thing I think of when I think of a lumbering oaf. It gives off an air of obliviousness despite how fucking stacked and strong it is. Crabrawler's design is more subdued, a simple blue and purple crab with big meaty claws. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist putting that joke in. Is it too easy? Yes. Do I care? No. Crabrawler and Crabominable are based on two of the coolest frickin' crabs around, the coconut crab and the Yeti crab. Yeti crabs have long, hairy-looking arms, and coconut crabs are fucking gigantic. I know that this should terrify me, but a 3-foot-long crab that climbs trees and can break open coconuts and kill birds for sustenance is just... nature's awesome, man. I bring up the coconut crab thing because of Crabrawler's tendency to lounge around near berry trees. Crabrawler is unique in that you find it hiding in piles of berries on the field, which is a fun and different way to encounter a wild Pokemon. It's a far cry from crappy timed events like Drifloon or Spiritom's talking adventure. I may like Crabominable a lot, but it's not a good Pokemon. It's so close to being awesome too. Ice Fighting is an amazing type combination for offense. It has the ability Iron Fist, and it comes packing a decent number of moves to complement that. Hell, it even has a signature move in Ice Hammer, and look at that attack stat. But everything else is working against it. 6 weaknesses is a tough pill to swallow, and it doesn't have the bulk to really take a hit. It's fine that it's slow. Hell, Hammer Arm and Ice Hammer basically require it to be slow, but it's so squishy that it's hard for it to get much of anything done. Going second pretty much every time is not fun if your Pokemon can't take any punishment. And probably the worst thing about it, in Vanilla Sun and Moon, you literally can't evolve Crabrawler until the end of the game. They fixed that problem in Ultra, but Jesus, it shouldn't have been a problem to begin with. Imagine playing through all of Vanilla Sun and Moon with these stats. That's a tragedy. It's a real bummer that it's so difficult to use because I like a lot of things about it, but in my time using it in the games, it's always a liability. Crabominable is just a boneless bear tick. Literally. If you've watched my stuff recently, you'd know that for about a year and a half now, I've been super into the Pokemon trading card game. I know that not a lot of you watched that video, but at least my Twitter followers are aware. Because I got into the TCG with the Sun and Moon generation, my opinion on some Pokemon has been colored by their cards. I haven't been talking about it to this point because it is a bit needless to dedicate a paragraph in every entry to the TCG. Hold on, I'll make up for that now. Alolan Sandslash deserved a GX years ago. Gold Rush Alolan Dugtrio is one of my favorite steel cards to just shit all over the opponent with. Armored Golisopod is a fun, tanky card that can hard counter GXs. And Crabominable, it's all generic thick boy cards. I don't really have anything to say about it. Cool, that's out of the way. Why the fuck am I bringing up the TCG halfway into the list? Well, Toxapex is a Pokemon that I didn't wholeheartedly care about until using it in the TCG. I took the time to grind SOS encounters for it and tried to use it during a playthrough of Sun and Moon, but since defensive Pokemon are naturally suited to multiplayer, I didn't get a lot of mileage out of it. I've always liked the design though, and funnily enough, our first look at Marini was an accidental peek at promo art from the TCG. I thought the design was weird. Later when the demo got cracked open by data miners, we got to see Marini and its evolution, and I still thought the design was pretty weird, but definitely cool. These two are based on the Crown of Thorns starfish, one of the most metal animals on the planet. This thing is covered in death spikes and lives off of coral, and likewise, Toxapex is a gruesome Pokemon that dismembers Corsola for food. In the games, Toxapex is a pure wall with a decent move pool that makes it perfect for poison stalling. It, for some reason, doesn't learn Spiky Shield, but at least it gets Baneful Bunker, a signature version of Protect that leaves the opponent poisoned. This torturous style of play is brought into the TCG, yes, we're finally getting back to that, with most of its cards. Base Sun and Moon and Lost Thunder introduce two nasty versions of Toxapex that can poison the opponents with relative ease, boosting the power of their attacks. Guardians Rising introduced Toxapex GX with its nasty 210 HP, a solid low-cost move in Spike Cannon, super intense poison that can melt any Pokemon over the course of a couple of turns, and Total Shelter GX, a high-damage move that completely shuts down your opponent's attacks for a turn. This card is the crown jewel of my Water Poison deck I built, and while I may not be a competitive player by any means, I'm proud of that deck and how much it makes my roommate squirm when I pull it out. It's a big, ugly gem at the center of a painful crown of thorns. You know, dragons are pretty cool. Pokemon's got a lot of different kinds of dragons, and especially when it comes to the pseudo-legendaries, we've gone through a lot of different unique concepts these past few generations. Gen 5 gave us a Hydra, Gen 6 gave us a Slime Monster, and Gen 7 gave us one of my favorite pseudo-legendaries and dragon types to date in Kammo-o. Kammo-o's design is what immediately sticks out. Once again, we've been given a rather unique concept for this region's pseudo-legendary. This time it's a bipedal lizard with a long body, limbs, and tail that's covered in scales. With Alola's tribalistic culture, Kammo-o's design fits right in. The scales are ornate, it looks as if it were wearing some sort of headdress, and the tail looks like a ritual staff. I like the look a lot, and I like that the abundance of scales isn't just for show. First, and more obviously, they act as armor. Jangmo-o and Hakamo-o are more subdued in their sheer number of scales, but it emphasizes the purpose of them acting as armor. Shoot, I remember when Jangmo-o was first revealed, the helmet was what led to the speculation that correctly guessed that it would evolve into a fighting type. Kammo-o has a lot more scales than what's necessary for armor though, and that plays into their second purpose, sound. That both serves as an intimidation tactic and a weapon. It can shake gently to startle opponents or furiously to create shockwaves of sound, as seen in its signature move Clanging Scales. Interestingly, Clanging Scales drops Kammo-o's defense, which gives me the impression that it's damaging or shedding some of its excess scales. Kammo-o had a ton of thought put into its design, not just as a wacky concept, but as a functional creature, and I always appreciate Pokemon that are given the extra attention to detail. The real fun of pseudo-legendaries is always their power, and Kammo-o did not disappoint in that aspect. It's got a strong balance between high attacking and defending stats at the cost of its speed and HP, and the payoff is worth that sacrifice. Everything in Alola is slow anyway, so it's not like Kammo-o losing speed matters that much. It learns plenty of strong moves, both physical and special, and gets decent type coverage at that. All is expected from a pseudo-legendary, and with a unique type to boot. It's excellent for offensive stab and has a lot of resistances to play into its defensive stats, but it's a double-edged sword since it also has a lot of weaknesses, most damningly a quad weakness to Fairy. That shit hurts, but I can't say I mind too much. Even with those glaring weaknesses, Kammo-o is a fun Pokemon to use with a strong design, so it's hard to ask for more. except maybe, just maybe, the sound type. There are too many Pokemon and moves now that would be perfect for the sound type, Kameo included. Make it fucking happen. So, I've talked a lot, especially on Twitter, about how disenchanted I am with fire starters. For the last nearly 20 years, they've all followed a pretty similar design philosophy. And based on Scorbunny's design and the very real leaks, things are going to be staying that way. I don't even care about the fire fighting type or the debate over whether or not we should care about it. I'm just tired of every fire starter doing the same thing. And the one time it looked like we were going to get an exception, Delphox happened, and Delphox's design is tragic. I bring this up not just to throw shade at Scorbunny and Delphox, even though those are always fun things to do, but obviously because of Incineroar. I hated this thing when it first leaked. I went on and on about how much I hated it on Twitter. Even with the concept of a heel wrestler and taking on the dark type, it felt like the last straw for me. Game Freak had run out of ideas for fire starters and was just going to keep recycling the bipedal Bara furry bait concept, but with a different type so that we can't be mad because it's technically not a fire fighting type. I hated that. I hated the concept, I hated the stupid hands and disproportionate torso, I hated that it went from a chunker and Torracat to just the same shit as always. The game came out and I lightened up on it a bit. Like with every other Pokemon in Sun and Moon, they gave it a lot of personality. But being 100% honest, nothing else matters because Incineroar was easily my favorite newcomer in Smash Ultimate. That reveal trailer was awesome, and since I love characters with a strong grab game in Smash, Incineroar was right up my alley. Cat. Meow. Yeah? Anyways, Incineroar's appeal in Smash isn't just his strong throws, he's also incredibly dumb. In Sun and Moon, he's a goof, but the Smash team took that personality and dialed it to its logical extreme. When you land a hit in Smash, Incineroar goes into a pose, hyping himself up and goading the opponent. It's hilarious and makes Incineroar unlike any other character on the roster, even if it is entirely visual. And then there's his special moves. Darkest Lariat is a good get-off-me maneuver that doubles as a high-priority kill move. Cross Chop, while not amazing recovery, is great for damage on stage and can dunk, and then there's Revenge. If the taunts made Incineroar visually unlike any other character, Revenge is what makes him stand out mechanically. Incineroar doesn't completely negate the damage and doesn't immediately strike back for a kill, instead power is stored up for your next attack. And it can stack. That's scary. The most fun way to spend that stored power is by using Incineroar's side special. It's seriously called Alolan Whip? Okay, Alolan Whip is one of my favorite moves to pull off in Smash history. The sheer amount of oomph it packs when you hit feels so good. With Revenge active, it becomes needlessly strong and can kill at fairly low percents too. Everything about Incineroar in Smash is just satisfying. The big hits, the big damage, the big chungus, that big stupid grin on his face. I went from loathing this cat to loving this cat. I cannot get enough of this dude. In my first playthrough of Pokemon Sun and Moon, most of my team members were caught on impulse. I may have planned out a team before the game came out due to all the information that was available, but I didn't adhere to it in the slightest. About halfway into the adventure, I came across the funky little meteor Pokemon, Minior, and my fate was sealed. I needed one. Now, I nickname all of my Pokemon, but my naming convention for Minior was kind of different. My Pokemon names are usually references, puns, or stupid shit like State Farm and Slurpee. In the case of Minior, I planned to give it not a name, but a title based on its color. My blue Minior was thus named Captain Rock, and a legend was born. Captain Rock was the unexpected MVP for my Sun and Moon team. I didn't underestimate it, I always knew Minior was good. It's a bit of a gimmicky Pokemon, its form changes making it either a pure tank or pure sweeper, and it's surprisingly great at both. Its move pool is also strong, with standout moves including Power Gem, Acrobatics, Dazzling Gleam, U-Turn, Shell Smash, Explosion, and the devilish Stealth Rock. But like I said, I knew all of this. When I say it was the unexpected MVP of my playthrough, I say that because I didn't expect it to secure so many wins. In the campaign, it was strong because of its diverse type coverage and, more pressingly, its speed. With 120 speed, it's the second fastest non-legendary, non-Ultra Beast Pokemon introduced in Gen 7, only beaten out by Ribombee. And in the whole game, there's only a few Pokemon like Crobat and Talonflame that can outspeed beat it. That's nuts, man. I mean, I knew it was fast, but jeebus. While the speed was the most useful asset during the campaign, its utility made it the MVP for my multiplayer battles. I'm not kidding when I say this little meteor was the crux of pretty much every win back when I played the game with others. Granted, much of that comes down to how good Stealth Rock is. It's still one of the most needlessly strong moves in Pokemon history, but its ability to take hits while setting up and then dish out damage afterwards, crazy. I'll never forget when a coworker at the time challenged me to a battle after talking some smack about how lame my team was, and I stomped him. That coworker was actually my then boss, and I'm surprised I had my job after that. And now for a Pokemon you all expected. I made it pretty clear during my top 10 starter Pokemon that I fucking love Rowlet. Rowlet is the kind of Pokemon that I see for the first time, fall in love with, and have to include on my team. I'm a sucker for cute shit, and Rowlet is quite possibly the cutest Pokemon ever designed. Every aspect of it is deliberately engineered to reach the highest possible specifications for the cute factor. I will cherish it forever, and it's evidence that there might still be a god out there after all. Hell, I loved Rowlet's design so much I went out of my way to buy a plush before the game was even out. Decidueye starts to lean into the typical third evolution of a starter cool vibe, but then it pulls on its hoodie strings when it gets embarrassed and you realize it's just pretending. Rowlet is a rock-solid party member for a lot of the adventure, though it does struggle in areas. Like everything else in Alola, it's weirdly slow despite being a bird of prey. And before evolving into Decidueye and gaining the ghost type, it has a quad weakness to ice. It makes up for these weaknesses with a strong move pool, solid mixed attacking stats, and a pretty excellent type offensively. Man, the addition of the ghost type was such a cool shift. There really was no reason to change Rowlet's type since it started out with a dual type, but the fact that they did it anyways was rad. I like that the trailer even slowed down for a beat to give that second type some impact. They knew it would catch us off guard. I made fun of it a second ago for being a dork, but Decidueye is a really cool Pokemon, and they really brought that side out of it in Pokken Tournament. If I wasn't trash garbage at fighting games, I would have tried out Pokemon Tournament, and I probably would have played as Decidueye. He looks sick. On the subject of fighting games, I'm still a bit surprised that Decidueye didn't end up in Smash, but it all makes sense. With Charizard returning to the Pokemon Trainer, there was no need to complete a grass, fire, water triangle, and as I admitted to myself, Decidueye's abilities make it conceptually very similar to Pit, who already had Dark Pit as a clone, so that would have been a double redundancy. I already talked about what makes Incineroar unique, and with hindsight, I'm glad they went with it. But it also means my predictions were wrong, so I guess I'll just play as Green Dark Pit and pretend I'm an owl. My favorite Alola Pokemon is Pyukumuku. What, did you expect build-up? Buddy, look, there's no point in beating around the bush. Anyone who follows me on Twitter has known for a while how fond I am of Pyukumuku. It's not even just my favorite Pokemon from Alola. I've gone on the record multiple times saying that it's my favorite Pokemon period in the past few years. I fucking love this thing, and I post that every time I pull a new Pyukumuku card, but in all that time it's been my favorite Pokemon, I haven't really talked about why. In the case of Pyukumuku, there's things I like and things I don't. Its design is great. It's a mix of sea cucumbers and sea bunnies, with the primary inspiration being the former. Like real-world sea cucumbers, it doesn't move much, and it has the uncanny ability to spit out its internal organs as a weapon. Yes, that's a real thing that sea cucumbers do, and Pyukumuku took it to the logical extreme by having a hand inside of its body. They even worked that into its ability, Innards Out, which is similar to Aftermath, but a lot more dangerous since the damage number isn't static and has the potential to be a lot more than just 25%. On that note, I'll admit, I'm not quite sure what they were trying to accomplish with Pyukumuku's battle capabilities. Innards Out is the kind of ability that benefits from taking a lot of damage at once, yet Pyukumuku has an ungodly high defense stat and tiny HP stat. That's probably why Unaware is preferred for competitive play. Innards Out really doesn't synergize with its stats. They gave it the fist gimmick, and yet it can't learn any punching moves, so it's stuck as a stall Pokemon, which isn't all that fun unless you like toxic stalling or counter-based gameplay. Nothing about its abilities really match up with its design beyond it being the slowest Pokemon ever. It's been years now, and I'm still not over my initial disappointment that Pyukumuku is effectively worthless for single player. Even if it is strong in multiplayer, I can't use it in my adventures, and that will always bum me out. Despite all that negativity just now, it's still my favorite Pokemon, which begs the question of why. Well, who cares if it's not the best? I used to be really self-conscious about what I liked and felt like I had to justify to myself that the things I liked were objectively good or had to have these deep emotional connections to them, but that doesn't have to be the case. Sometimes you can just like things. In a recent Love Live video, I referred to this concept as pure endearment. It's the idea that you get attached to something for the simple fact that it makes you happy, and it's pretty much the whole reason Pyukumuku is my current favorite Pokemon. I look at Pyukumuku sitting on a beach waiting to be yeeted into the ocean or chilling in a clothes store despite the fact that it it doesn't need to wear clothes, and I smile. I open up a new pack of Pokemon cards and find another Pyukumuku, and I get excited to add another one to the family. I like and retweet all sorts of fan art of Pyukumuku on Twitter. I have a plush sitting on my shelf. There's that weird Japanese song about it. All of it makes me happy. I just love this cucumber very, very much. This has been Idionoben, and thank you for watching my top 10 favorite Alola Pokemon. If you enjoyed the video, there are buttons below that help you support me. One's a hand, one's a bell, and one is useless without the bell. I also have a Patreon where you can donate as little as $1 a month to join the names here on screen and gain early access to long-form videos like these. A special shout out to the Patreon creator Spotlight, Silver. He streams games on Twitch, specifically a lot of Kingdom Hearts, so if you're a fan of that series, check him out. Thank you all for your support, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.